Hello, friends. In the West, most of the so-called media have become parrots destined to spread fear, hatred, and misinformation. Official journalism, nowadays, has degenerated into a kind of psychological terrorism of the masses in the service of the progressive totalitarian regimes that have taken hold in some of our countries. I'm not surprised that young people are ignoring these media outlets and that more and more of us are disregarding their blatant propaganda. Don't go. Let me tell you the conclusions of someone who, after many years in the information profession, feels a great deal of contempt and embarrassment for that disloyal and deceitful journalism towards its audience and servile to its bosses. Hello, I am Constantino de Miguel. Welcome to the channel. Information and opinion are not harmless, but the opposite. Look at Rwanda and Burundi, where 30 years ago, broadcasters on 1000 Hills Radio incited interethnic violence from their microphones, leading to a terrible tribal genocide. Well, what about in the West? Here, the alarmist, toxic, false, and biased messages published in the media under the false guise of impartiality and journalistic rigor end up ruining and destroying millions of lives. Yes, millions of lives, because their Manichaean and moralistic vision seeks first and foremost to indoctrinate and then to divide societies. That is, pitting some against others. These media outlets encourage conflicts and wars between countries and between groups. They also set themselves up as judges, sentencing and condemning some while applauding and elevating others. 12 Volets Euronews, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Russia Today, El País, Le Monde, New York Times. Once prestigious media outlets respected internationally, now globalist propaganda machines. Each one adds their own flavor, their own bias of misinformation according to their interests. If Russia Today promotes the Bolivarian agenda in Ibero-America, giving a platform to all the leaders of the Puebla cartel, Moscow's television, on the other hand, whitewashes Putin's abuses in Russia and in the war in Ukraine. Al Jazeera magnifies the massacre in Gaza, but refrains from criticizing Iran, condemning the terrorism of Hamas and Hezbollah, while denying and silencing Israel's right to defend itself after a barbaric attack on its territory and population. Euronews completely and utterly ignores the overwhelming and decisive victory of the National Rally in France, labeling it as far-right, while promoting the communist and Islamist Popular Front. BBC or Deutsche Welle spread alarmism about climate change and violent indigenism in Ibero-America, violent and separatist, while promoting the progressive or woke ideas of the 2030 Agenda, own nothing and be happy. The Spanish newspaper El País, which once was a great newspaper, has degenerated into a propaganda organ for Spain's social communist regime. The Madrid newspaper positions itself as a great defender of the Bolivarian regimes of Latin America, while criticizing Bukele of El Salvador and Milei of Argentina, mocking their achievements and displaying a despicable moral superiority. Well, but who is behind these propaganda media? An entire international mafia of globalists, big banks, and mega investment funds like BlackRock, masters of the universe like Soros or Gates, international organizations like the United Nations and its agencies, as well as the European Union itself, and finally, governments captive to the 2030 Agenda. All of them indeed agree and are synchronized in practicing a perverse social engineering that, in fact, starts by changing what people think. And people think based on what they acquired knowledge in school, the influence of family and friends, but also the media that supply dormant or distracted minds with high doses of indoctrination, in various ways and experiences. In my life, I've had the opportunity to work in various international media outlets, and I have seen how editorial freedom and the pursuit of impartiality and truth have gradually degraded year after year. Those who finance and manage the newsrooms have finally managed to impose a single way of thinking, which is leftist, globalist, and militant. The journalist who dissents does not publish and therefore does not work. Yes, friends, once upon a time there was independent journalism, a necessary and essential profession for any free and democratic society, to the point that it was called the Fourth Estate. That journalism had the mission of seeking and selecting the most relevant news for the audience, addressing it with truthfulness and critical sense, corroborating the authenticity of the facts, and finally, contrasting and contextualizing the final information to deliver it to listeners, viewers, or readers in the clearest and most engaging way possible. Well, that free journalism is no longer possible in traditional media, all of which, absolutely all, are sold out to political and economic interests, to the point that those who work there cease to be true journalists and become sellers of lies. Fraudsters, propagandists, agitators, and in many cases, mere actors and extras who offer themselves to the highest bidder without any scruples. The goal is subliminal advertising and political propaganda or direct commercial advertising, but it is no longer about spreading news to later sell you the soda or the detergent. The perverse thing now is that they also want to brainwash you, make you ignorant and above all docile and obedient, so that they can indeed inoculate you with the totalitarian ideas imposed by these globalist mafias. Examples abound and indeed began to intensify significantly since those terrible years of the pandemic when the media in Europe followed their government's instructions, denying a voice to anyone who disagreed with the practices of locking people up and forcing them to get vaccinated. Vaccine objectors were accused of being denialists, and even experts who criticized the practices of laboratories like Pfizer were not given a platform, which in the end have proven to be dangerous for the vaccinated. In Spain, journalists, even from conservative media, hide the nationality of aggressors, rapists, and squatters, while panelists invited to a primetime television show justify rapes, murders, and thefts if the perpetrators are immigrants, such as those from other countries. By the way, the media portray the massive arrival of illegal immigrants in the Canary Islands aboard boats as something anecdotal, highlighting their rescue at sea or the accommodation they receive upon arrival, while emphasizing the willingness of political leaders to welcome them. Throughout Spain, columnists and commentators on all primetime channels effectively justify the unrestricted entry of illegal immigrants, but at no point do they talk about border violations or migratory invasion, despite the fact that all of this is reported on social media and is a major concern for the majority of the Spanish population. In Spain, that effusive and exaggerated kiss to the player Jenny Hermoso by the head of the Spanish Football Federation is indeed also magnified and demonized. But true and unequivocal crimes of aggression or gender-based violence are labeled as isolated incidents if they are perpetrated by foreigners. In the French elections, traditional media label and brand conservative or sovereignist and patriotic right-wing parties as far-right or even fascist, despite being the preferred option for a majority of the population. The media close to the Democratic Party in the US have undeniably and systematically denied for years the evidence of President Joe Biden having senile dementia after the pathetic debate with Trump. They continue to disguise the evidence of their incompetence, and thus further becoming transmission belts for the team that runs the White House. Also in that country, 5 black police officers beat a black boy to death, but only a brief note was published in the local newspaper. However, years ago, when a white police officer stopped a black man and suffocated and killed him by pressing his knee on his neck. That terrible incident made front-page news, denouncing racism and police brutality. We can see sensationalist and biased alarmism every day in the news broadcasts of television in Germany, France, or Spain. In the weather report, maps are shown in deep red when they used to be yellow, thus exaggerating high temperatures to highlight the climate change emergency, such as highlighting the climate change emergency. And returning to Spain, when some digital media dare to raise their voice and risk denouncing the socialist government mired in corruption cases like the one involving Begoña, the wife of Pedro Sanchez, then that intolerant and dictatorial take of the president of the government awakens, who does not hesitate to label that denouncing press as a mudslinging machine and, once again, an instrument of the far right. But Sanchez goes further. He approves a law according to which the press that is not obedient, that throws mud, as he says, will see any subsidy or aid completely eliminated, while the government will cancel all institutional advertising to that unruly media outlet. Yes, friends, the Spanish socialist government will undoubtedly indeed even pass a censorship law aimed at gagging free and independent journalists. Will Spain still be a true democracy after that? In my opinion, I highly doubt it at all. Obviously, in Spain, no media outlet is going to go against the government if it is their main advertiser. In summary, in Spain and the rest of Europe, the media are the voice of their master because they eat out of their hand, meaning that those who pay more get more airtime, more good things are published about them, and the bad things are silenced. Meanwhile, in the European Union, a directive on digital services was approved that restricts freedom of information by prohibiting content it deems illegal. In other words, there will be a series of officials who will determine what can be published and what cannot be published, protecting the population and mainly children. Brussels argues that to achieve a free and democratic Europe, it is necessary to fight against misinformation and hate speech. The problem is that the Eurocrats will define those terms in their own way and use them as a weapon to censor and potentially even further restrict freedom of expression. Violating the European Digital Services Act entails very high fines for the publication or digital media, specifically 6% of global turnover. That's right. It seems to me that we have reached an Orwellian ministry of truth like in 1984, a series of officials we do not know and did not elect, working from offices in the United Nations, the European Commission, or the Spanish government's 2010, drafting slogans such as allowing mass immigration of Africans in 2025, abandoning gasoline cars in 2030, and stopping meat consumption in 2040, paraphrasing Orwell. And then, some privileged mind will, in some way, decide upon this or that version of those slogans, will definitively draft them in their own way, and will set in motion a complex process of mass dissemination. Then, the chosen lie will enter the permanent records and thus be officially recorded as the permanent and unchangeable truth. Goebbels, as he famously stated in his speech, already said it, "Let me control the media, and I will turn any nation into a herd of pigs." Quoting Orwell again, indeed, the greatest heresy in this new totalitarian order of information is common sense. So let's not lose that common sense. Let's not allow our intelligence to be insulted. Let's indeed diversify our sources of information by truly turning to those that are free and independent. And let's not stop denouncing lies and misinformation. We can still definitely do all that in censorship-free spaces, like here on the internet. For now, and no other is the intention that motivates this journalist to continue commenting on current events without any restrictions, ties, or impositions. That's why I truly, really, genuinely appreciate it if you give me a like and subscribe to this channel to encourage me to keep going in this cultural battle. I sincerely thank you very much for your attention and wish you a happy day. See you soon.